Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Matt Lisle, and this is day one of Coffee with Coach Lisle, where I help parents, coaches, and players around the world tackle the challenges of life and athletics. This morning, we're going to talk about coffee. I'm going to share some parent nightmare emails. I'm going to tell you something that I learned this week that was pretty crazy, and I'm going to answer some of your questions. And so we'll have a little Q&A session. So start thinking about what questions you might want to ask. And at the very end, I'm going to share one of my favorite coaching memories of all time. So I wanted to start this morning off by talking about coffee. Okay, so I won't get into the long story of it, but I never had my first cup of coffee until I was 35 years old. And a long story short, I held off. I'm a pretty high energy guy, didn't need the coffee. And at 35, I had a work thing where I was dead tired. Tried my first cup. Let's just say I felt the charge, and ever since then, I've been 2 cups a day for the last 8 years. So, welcome to the coffee addict family if you're one like me. So each day, I'm going to have my coffee show with a new coffee mug. If you're like me, my wife and I have a million coffee cup mugs, and a lot of them have stories. So for me, this coffee, even though we're not from Texas, this one says clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. And if you're a fan of Friday Night Lights, you know that saying. It's from my favorite TV show of all time, Friday Night Lights, my favorite character of all time, Coach Taylor. So if you haven't watched that show, I highly recommend it. It's literally my favorite show of all time, Friday Night Lights. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. At home we have this thing called the Nespresso machine, and my wife and I, buy the pods, and we do that every day at home. But I want to hear from you guys today. What is your favorite coffee? I remember growing up, my grandma was a Folgers person, and she used to literally have the Folgers out of the can. I think my three favorite are probably, and I hate to say this, I'm very basic: Starbucks, Pete's Coffee, and my number one is Dutch Bros. And if you haven't heard of Dutch Bros or don't know where that is, it's mostly on the West Coast. It's just an incredible thing. So if you've ever had Dutch Bros, let me know. But I would love to hear what your favorite coffees are. And so also I wanted to share with you guys, in my circle of friends, and maybe it is the same way in your circle of friends, drinking black coffee is like a badge of honor. For whatever reason, people love to brag about, I only drink black coffee. I've tried it a million times. I guess I'm just not man enough, I guess you could say, for it. But I'm not a huge black coffee fan. So if you've been following me a little bit, I'm sure you saw this on Facebook as well. And so the question of the day for you guys right here is, how do you take your coffee? And like I said, it's funny because on Facebook, I see a lot of people who are saying, hey, I'm an F6. I only drink black coffee. And I admitted to myself, I'm pretty much in that middle range right there, maybe an F4, E4. I like to have some cream. I have some vanilla creamer in here that I really like. So I would love to hear from you guys below. How do you take your coffee? How do you like it? Are you an F6? Are you all the way down in the middle somewhere? And so I would love to hear from you guys. What type of coffee do you like, and how do you take it? So that's all we're going to talk about for coffee today. So again, would love to hear from that. Let's see here. Tad says G7, so he likes his really, really dark. Uh, Looks like Jonathan's on here. Jonathan likes it black like midnight. That's pretty good. Let's see here. Who else has got Lance? Lance likes his all black. Yep, Shannon. All right. Brenda, the first person a little bit more like me. C3. That's a pretty creamy coffee, Brenda. So, like me, you're more in my range of coffee. Amber says she takes it with almond milk, no carb creamers. And I know a lot of people that do that. Almond milk, for whatever reason, my coffee just doesn't do it for me. Ryan knows about Dutch Bros. Ice 911 or Ice Double Torture. I'll have to check that out sometime. I've only had the vanilla ice creamer. I'm a vanilla ice kicker. I've actually had something called banana split there that people probably wouldn't say qualifies as coffee. Uh, Rachel says she's a D4. Yeah, that's kind of more in my range. A couple tablespoons of creamer for me. So, Rachel, thanks for being more on my side of the thing. Cassie, same thing, D4. That's kind of the world that I'm in too. And Michael, hey, proud of you, man. 44 years old, coffee free. Like I said, I held off 35 years, and after I had my first cup, and I really felt the energy coursing through my body, I was hooked on it. So, and again, like I said, most of you, Don and Rick, most guys that I know, black coffee. My brother does it that way. A lot of my friends do. I just can't do it. So, coffee drinkers, good for you if you can do that. I appreciate that, but I can't do it. So if you've been following me at all on Facebook or following me on social media the last few years, one of the things you might know about me is that last year I authored a new book, my first book, called Dear Coach. And it says real emails from parents behaving badly on the field and at home and behind their computer screens. And this came from an idea from my dad a few years ago. My dad kept saying, "Hey, I'm going to publish a book of all these crazy parent emails I get." You know, my dad coached Little League for many years, travel ball, even a high school coach. So my dad's probably got 30 years of stories about coaches and crazy parents. And so for me, I decided, hey, you know what? I got to put it out there. So I put it out on social media. Send me your crazy parent stories. Send me your crazy parent emails. And myself, my sister, my editor, a bunch of us went through all the emails. And we really said, hey, these are the top emails that we've gotten, just crazy parent emails. And I created my first book on it. So it was really, really awesome. I really appreciate all the stories we got. And the book's been going great. So last year when we launched the book, we created a commercial for it. One of my best friends, Darren, and my two kids are in the video. And so if you haven't seen the Dear Coach commercial, I want to show it to you right now. I just think it's really funny. I think you'll get a kick out of it. And so here we go. This is the Dear Coach commercial.
Come on! Come on, don't pull your head, please. Don't pull your head, come on! What's he doing? Throw strikes! Just throw strikes, please. Throw strikes, please. Come on. You gotta catch that, come on!
Hello?
Put him in the game, right now.
Parents, these are the sounds that are happening at ballparks across America every day. Don't be like that guy. Pick up a copy of my book, Dear Coach, Real Emails from Parents Behaving Badly on the Field, at Home, and Behind Their Computer Screens. Pick up a copy of this book on Amazon today, and maybe you won't end up in the next book.
Come on! What's he doing? Come on!
All right, so again, that was the commercial that we created. I bought that outfit on Amazon, and it might be my Halloween outfit for the next few years, just to embarrass my kids, and a throwback to the old 1980s coaches. And so, you know, you might have had a PE teacher like that or a coach like that. I had a PE teacher and a coach who was both those roles and dressed like that. So I thought it was a pretty funny way to do that commercial. So be curious what you think about this commercial, those shorts, my socks, and don't think I haven't worn that since that day, because I absolutely have, and I'll bring it out to practice one day and wearing those. So again, hey, I just appreciate everybody who's tuned in this morning. You know, Wes and Rick and everybody else. There's so many people online. Pablo says he has those shorts in black. That's really cool. And so, and then Rick, yeah, totally. Sadly, we have all seen that parent. And Tad says, my dad used to wear those shorts. And so, yeah, my dad did too. And that's kind of where I got the idea from. My dad played softball for many years. And back in the 80s when I was growing up, a lot of the dads and dad coaches would rock those shorts. So I thought that was really cool. So the next segment of the show that I want to get into is what we call the Dear Coach segment, kind of leading from that commercial into this book. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go to Amazon and check out my book. It's called Dear Coach. If you just go to Amazon and search Dear Coach, you'll find it. If you've already got it, hey, go over there and leave a review for me. And if it's a 4-star or below review, ignore this comment. But if you're going to leave a 5-star review, please head up there, and I would love to. Love for you to leave a comment there. So let's talk about Dear Coach. Let's talk about the book a little bit. So I thought it would be really fun each day to read a story from this. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to give away a signed copy of this book every day. So again, if you haven't checked it out, go to Amazon. It's really funny. And I'll tell you right now, I want to read you just one of the stories from this book. So as a preface, I'm going to kind of show you the introduction of this book. And that's me with my gray hair coming in right there. The introduction of the book says this, and this is true. The emails you are about to read are true. The names have changed to protect the innocent, and this is true. You are about to enter a world of youth sports, a world in which parents sometimes behave badly, both on the field and at home behind their computer screens. All right, so this story right here, and I'll tell you, this book was illustrated by the great Wes Molbash. Wes is an incredible artist who illustrated this book for me, and this is the first story in the book. So you can see the picture right there. That might give you an idea of the story, a little preview of what the story is going to be about. But this is an email that I received from a soccer coach regarding one of his parent stories. So the story goes like this. Dear Coach Lisle, I am a 14U boys soccer coach. Last season, I rotated a kid out of the game, and he sulked heavily on the field. A minute later, he's standing next to me with his phone in his hand. He told me that his mom wanted to talk to me about why he wasn't currently playing. When I looked up, I saw his mom on the other sideline yelling into her phone. I could actually hear her screaming, not on the phone, but across the field. I took his phone, hung it up, and tossed it into his bag. Let's just say I had to have a long talk with mom afterwards. Sincerely, hold my calls. And so this is a true story, okay? This is something that I'm just blown away that it's possible, but that is a true story about. And I said, this book is filled with those stories. And and if you get this book, you're going to see there's a section called Coach Lisle's Commentary, where I try to share some stories. So parents, don't call your coaches while they're coaching your kids. That's just wrong for one. And so tomorrow we'll read more stories a bit about it. If you've had stories like that, if you have a crazy story or you relate to that story, or if a parent has ever called you when you were coaching, or you've ever called a coach while they're coaching, I want to hear about it too. So appreciate a little story time with Dear Coach. And then today I want to get into just kind of our main segment of the day. And last week, a report came out in October, and it kind of went viral on social media this last week about conditioning. So if you're like me, you grew up with coaches. And in high school, I played football, basketball, track, and baseball. And when we were conditioning a lot in football, we would run. We'd be dying, and we would bend over, and we would hold our knees and try to catch our breath. And our coaches would always yell, get your hands up on your head, let the oxygen stand up, and all the coaches would yell at you about that. And a study came out this week that says that the hands-on knee posture resulted in superior heart rate recovery and greater tidal volume, which is the amount of air inhaled into the lungs with each breath, compared to the hands on the head posture. So I'll post the link later, but it's in a law journal talking about recovery postures, which one was better for athletes. And again, something I thought all along was that you put your hands up, you stand tall, and it lets the air get to you. It's better for recovery. But we found out this is absolutely untrue. One of the things I wanted to read from this study says, the ability to recover faster from multiple bouts of exercise is a crucial part of optimizing performance for athletes in a variety of sports, such as soccer, rugby, basketball, and American football. Thus, using the best recovery modality, in this case posture, is crucial to minimize fatigue and potential injuries due to altered biomechanics from the taxing exercise. On the basis of the findings in this study, the hands-on knee posture significantly improved the heart rate recovery and oxygen So I want to hear from you guys. Am I the only one in the boat that had coaches that yelled at me all the time about making sure you stand up, put your hands on your head? And is anyone else shocked or surprised at this, or is this something that the whole world knew about and I didn't in regards to the hands on the knee posture? Again, like I said, for me, I always thought standing tall, you put your hands up, that helped you recover faster. But to find out all along that the best way to recover is just putting your hands on your knees and bending over and breathing. So I would love to hear from you guys on whether that's the thing. One of the things I read a lot of Facebook comments on my Facebook about this, and a lot of people talked about that to them it didn't matter that helped with recovery. For them, it was about toughness and about posture and body language. And I'll tell you this, body language is really important. Strong body language is really important. In a game, having negative body language is really bad. But I can tell you right now that the most important thing, whether in a game, if you're coaching basketball or soccer, football, conditioning, recovery, and how quickly you can recover helps your team win. So again, I read a lot of comments here about, hey, it's about toughness. You look weak if you do that. Totally disagree on that. And if you watch The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, you see Michael Jordan bending over in a lot of the shots as he's trying to get his thing. And so it's just an incredible thing to talk about, the hands on the knees. And so hopefully, if you haven't learned, I'd love to hear if you agree with that, you disagree. If you're a coach, have you said that before? No judgment. I said I've said that many times in my coaching career. And I know some nurses jumped on and talked about the posture facilitates the abdominal contents to be pushed forward. It's really funny to see just the different people talked about active recovery, active cool down, and a lot of people talk about the mental side of the sport. And so I would love to hear different things. Travis says, it's time to adapt and apologize. Just sat and told them to stand tall. Just Saturday, I told them to stand tall. So Travis, hey, that's the thing about coaching, about the growth mindset. I can tell you the stuff that I taught my kids, whether it was hitting or anything with coaching, it's a constant learning thing. So I appreciate that. Amber says, yes, in cross country, definitely was told a lot to stand tall, probably not put your hands on your knees. And it's funny, Ryan, totally agree. Hands on knees felt more natural. And you were told you're weak from coaches. And I tell you, I can tell you right now, throughout my playing days, that coaches told us a lot of times that was the case too. That it was weak to bend over. You had to stand tall, and so that's pretty crazy. Let's see here. Anybody else have any thoughts on, like I said, the hands and the knees, whether you were taught it or coached it? And I think it's really interesting how a lot of advocates for it will say, well, it's not about the recovery, it's about the mindset and the toughness. And I agree. If in some areas maybe it is, but in sports and recovery, that's not the case. So that was something I really learned this week. I thought was pretty crazy, and I know I thought was pretty crazy too. So the next segment that we're going to go into is Q&A. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds as I talk. I want to talk a little bit more about the hands and knees, but I would love to hear you guys' questions. It can be anything: coaching, parenting, life, hitting, you name it. I wanted to give you guys some time for some Q&As. It could even be Q&A regarding the hands and the knee posture if you want. And so, but I thought it was really cool just to see how many comments on my Facebook from people just saying, hey, I really learned a lot from this. The study was really great for that. And, for me, I see someone says, for me, it always depended on how fatigued I was. At max fatigue, hands on my knees definitely felt better. If it wasn't that bad, putting it on there. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I would love to go into a Q&A session. Does anybody have any questions this morning? I know it's bright and early. again, I appreciate you guys tuning in and joining me this morning. And if you're on the West Coast like me, it might be early. My kids decided to get up. My youngest, or one of my youngest, I've got 5 of them. Chase, my 8-year-old, decided to get up at 5:30 this morning, like he does most mornings. So my house is always hustling and bustling by 7 a.m. And so, we're probably awake on the if you're on the East Coast, maybe your day's been going a little bit. And so if anybody has any questions at all today, this morning, I want to get to a little Q&A session and we'll go into that. Let's see what else we got. Ed says hands to the knees always help take pressure off the spine. Absolutely true. That's a good point. Brett says I always thought front medical standpoint, hands on head helped raise chest and ribs to expand lungs. And Brett, that was what I thought too. And I thought it was really cool that on my Facebook page, I had nurses and people talk about, people who worked in the medical field talk about, hey, we've known this for a long time. We've told you, we've been telling people this. So nurses and doctors talked about how our body naturally does that. And I thought that was really cool. So Peter asks, what's your number one attribute you look for when you scout a player? And I'll tell you, I won't get into a lot of I don't want to really get into a lot of the recruiting stuff today, but for me, skill will always stand out number one. As a college coach, I've been doing this for a long time. Skill will always stand out. The best players will always stand out. And for me, attitude, effort, hustle, those things are the baseline. Those things are the bottom. Like you have to absolutely have those things, and they can help you stand out in a group of people that aren't doing those things. But for hustle and effort, to me, those things are great. Those stand out. But if you're looking to stand out, honestly, it's skill. You've got to be power bats, power arms, the best in the world to that. So if you feel like, hey, I've mastered hustle, attitude, effort, I do all these things really well, and I'm not getting a lot of looks, my best advice is go home and work on your skills. Whatever sport you're in, go work on your skills. Nick says, same over here, 5 to 6 a.m. So Nick, I would love to hear where you are at, that it's 5 to 6 a.m., where it's 7 a.m. here in California. So I would love to hear where you're at. Quinice asks, do you think 16U softball should be implementing softball as part of their regular lineup? Yeah, I mean, I think every team, when it comes to softball and baseball, every team has its own makeup. If you have 9 hitters, your 9 best players are all really fast and not a lot of power, I'm going to change my game plan to those people. So 16U softball, would I implement slapping if I had the athletes to do that? Absolutely. I think that every college softball lineup should have 2 to 3 slappers in it, people who can get on base a lot. Larry asks, how do you build confidence in young softball players? And, for me, it's really about just encouraging them, loving on them, giving them permission to fail. If you yell at your kids every time they drop a pop fly or, they miss a free throw or a layup, it's just funny. I see it all the time. A great example, kid dribbles down, he goes up for the layup, he's wide open, it's an easy shot, he misses it. And all of a sudden you hear the dad or the coach yell, come on, you gotta make that. And it's like, man, it's really hard to instill confidence in kids when you point out their failures every time they do it and remind them. Same thing with, I see a lot of times, a pop-up in the infield. They go to catch it, it hits their glove, drops to the ground. All of a sudden you hear the coach, the parent yell, come on, you got to catch that. And when I hear that happen, same thing, my favorite one at Little League fields is, come on, just throw strikes. When a kid's thrown like 8 straight balls, everyone's getting restless, you're feeling bad for the kid, and all of a sudden you hear the coach on the bucket or dad say, come on, just throw strikes. And all I'm thinking about is, man, this 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 16-year-old, what do you think they're trying to do? And by doing that, it makes it really difficult to build confidence. So how do you build confidence in young athletes, period? You love on them. You let them know that no matter how they perform on the field, that your love for them does not change whatsoever. If they go 0 for 4, they don't score any baskets in that game, they're the goalie that let 5 goals in, No matter what, you love them, and your love for them is not affected by their performance. That's how you can instill confidence in young athletes. Ryan asks, I'm an instructor. I have a high school girl with an 80-mile-per-hour exit speed. She's my top hitter. What's the best way to keep pushing her? I don't have other female students to push her right now. That's a great question. So if you coach an athlete that's better than every athlete on your team, the best way to challenge him or her is to sit down and talk to them and create challenges. And that's what I love about metrics. We use metrics in softball and baseball: exit velocity, bat speed, distance, and we use those metrics to motivate athletes that are competitive and want to get to the next level. And so for me, if I have a high school athlete that wants to get to the next level, they're better than every athlete on that team, I'm going to tell them that they need to focus on what that next level looks like. Okay, at the college level, these are what these athletes are doing, and you are here. And so using them to motivate versus the competition on a team. Again, like, they may be better than everybody else, so maybe they go down to their level of your team. They don't hustle as much. And so the best way to push student athletes is by putting that carrot, putting that motivation at something that is above them, in the sense, like I said, metrics is a really good thing for me. A great example, and I'll use softball as an example, is exit velocity. We have at Fresno State what's called the 80-mile-per-hour club. So maybe she's someone who's like at 75 miles an hour exit velocity, and everybody else in your team is 60. And so everyone else is trying to get to 65, but she's trying to get to that 80-mile-an-hour club. And you can say, hey, if you reach this goal, you get some ice cream, or find different ways to motivate. Every athlete has different ways to motivate and push them, and so finding ways to do that. Steven asks, what do you think about late kick? I think he meant leg kick. When it comes to hitting in baseball and softball, I think leg kicks are really individually decided. I think if you can hold a one-leg stand for a long time, have really good balance, you have really good timing, leg kicks are all for you. Let's see here. Wes asks, I'm an 11U major assistant coach. Myself and my head coach both have boys on the team. We have found it works best to coach each other's sons. They seem to listen better that way. Any experience there? So my dad coached me from the age I was 5 through 15. And then after I graduated high school and down the road, he actually was not my high school coach, but he coached at my high school. So I have a lot of experience with dad coaches, and what they call a daddy ball. My dad was much different than most dads. He was the dad who would throw BP, and if you complained about BP, he threw it at you. Not the other kids, just me. And he was much harder on me. And so there were some plus and negatives about that, but for me, it was all I knew. So back to your question about experience with two dads coaching and coaching their son, I think that's a great idea. My 16-year-old son, my 8-year-old son, both of them, they don't like to get coaching from me. I'll tell you right now, a few years ago, when my son was about 12 years old, working on hitting, he started talking to me. I said, hey, do you know this is what I do for a living? Like, I coach at a big time college as a hitting coach, and I work with major league players. He's like, yeah, Dad, I know. And so I've realized more and more with even my own kids, and I'm sure you guys know this too. I'd love to hear from you guys. Whenever I try to coach my kids, like, yeah, Dad, I know. And they don't want to be coached by me. So Wes, I think that's a great idea that you have on your guys' team, coaching each other's sons. They seem to listen better. It just depends on the kid. I can tell you, my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old daughter, they listen to my coaching a lot better. If I said, hey, Presley, let's go work on the batting and spread your feet out and get in your stance and do all things, she does a really good job of listening to me. But my boys, on the other hand, especially my older ones, not so much. So I think that's a great idea there, coaching each other's sons. Let's see. Jonathan asks, how do you handle when one of your players plays for a different team during the offseason and their parent comes to you and says the coach is not as good as you? Would you come and watch a game or practice? I stay away and stay as long as she is working hard and learning something. That's an interesting question. I haven't come across that too often, so I'm going to add it one more time for everybody to see. So Jonathan has an athlete that plays on a different team during the off season, and the parent doesn't really like the coach, thinks the teach is a lot different than you. Would you come and watch a game? Jonathan, I would probably stay away from that as much as you can. Unless the other coach is being demeaning and something dangerous. I would stay. I would just talk to the coach about what is it that's different about it, and try to talk to the parent a little bit about what's going on there, and I would try to get more of the story of why she thinks not as good as you and stuff like that. So I would talk more to the parent and go from there. Also, another question for you guys. How much coffee do you consume a day for you coffee drinkers? I can do 2 cups of about 8 ounces, and I have friends who drink 30, 40 ounces of coffee a day. I think I probably average 16. But again, I know people that drink it like water, so I'd be curious. How much coffee do you consume? Jerry says it's 10:23 here in Virginia, East Coast time. Nice. You've been getting up this morning a little bit. Vance asks, hey, Coach, hope all is well with you and the family. It is. Thank you. Everyone's safe right now. What advice can you provide for a player that needs to transition into a drop 3 bat from a drop 5? So he's talking about baseball. And right around 14U to high school, players go from a lighter bat to a heavier bat. The best way I can do this is practice a lot with, and if you're in that 14U range, practice in 10U range, 12U range, as much as you can. Practice with the wood bat. The way the bats are balanced is much different. So just training with a heavier bat, I would do it at least 6 months to a year in advance if you can. I mean, obviously, it's not everybody can do that, but if you have 6 months or a year to really start working on building it, and you don't even have to do it in games. You can, but if you like, I would just train with a drop 3 bat as much as possible. Make it a little bit easier to go from that. Jerry asks, what's a good number for a 14U softball team playing on a national level? Number of pitchers as well. And I'll tell you guys, I've coached at every level. I've coached T-ball, Little League, travel ball, high school, NAIA, D3, D2, D1, in the Pac-12, the SEC, and I've coached at Major League Baseball level. I will tell you the one level I've never taught at, never coached at, is travel softball. I've never coached at that level. So Jerry's asking, the number of pitchers as well, number of good players. For me, the number is I want to keep the number as low as possible. So in my dream situation, I've got 12 players and 4 pitchers, and 4 of those people can pitch. So just so that I don't have a bunch of players on the bench. When I see rosters of 16, 18, 20 players, and I know those players aren't getting better, unless that team is guaranteeing you a scholarship to land on another program or something like that, no chance I would do that. So to me, the lowest number possible to field a team every weekend, every game, and still have enough pitching. So 12 to 14 people, depending on how many pitchers you have in your roster. Peter says, hi, Matt. Hi, here from Peter from the Netherlands. I want to say I'm working a lot with your stuff in the heating vault, and I'm a big fan of your stuff. Peter, thanks for joining us from the Netherlands. Tell me, Peter, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it in the Netherlands right now? And I would be really curious to hear. So thanks for joining us. Let's see. Christine says, I wish every youth coach is listening to this. I'm so irritated by humiliation of players. And Christine, I tell you, that's one of the biggest reasons I got into coaching. The biggest reason why I'm doing these shows right now is just to help youth coaches and parents. And I know it's difficult. And there is a lot of humiliation going around with coaches. And hopefully people are getting better and better on that. So that's great. Brett asks, hey, Coach, I have a 12-year-old boy. He is an above-average baseball player. He is definitely on the skinny side. When do you feel they start working out with weights? I've always been in the mindset that the weight and gain will come. So I would say at the 12U level, 12-year-old level of my 12-year-old son, I would try to do as much body weight stuff as possible. Teaching them how to do push-ups and squats and be athletic. That's where I would start. And then as they start to get into 14 years old, 15 years old, start transitioning into high school, doing more weights things and teaching them I think that 14-year-old level is a great time to start focusing on technique. So as you get to high school, because you're going to have high school coaches and strength coaches and PE teachers that teach deadlifts and all these things, and so the proper technique would be something that I would really focus on. So I'm going to answer questions for 5 more minutes, and then I want to get into a couple more things. So if you get your questions in before, like I said, at 7:40 Pacific time, we'll head on to the next segment. Brad asks, one of my good hitters hits the ball really hard, but have a problem with their on-plane efficiency. What do you recommend? So, Brad, it's a great question when it comes to metrics, and that to me, that the answer is, is the person a really good hitter and they hit with power? Then I don't worry about the metrics. If you feel like it could help them, that's a different thing, and there's drills for that. But the best when I first got my first high school coaching job, my old high school coach and had been coaching for 40 plus years, and when he handed over the reins, he left me 2 pieces of advice. Number 1. He said, never have a parent as your assistant. And he laughed with that, but it's also true at the high school level. And I know that every high school is different in the resources, but I can tell you that has been an interesting thing for me. And then he said, the second best advice I can give you is never turn a 400 hitter into a 200 hitter. And what he meant was, if you have great players, you have a great hitter. Again, like I tell people all the time, if Mike Trout was to come into my batting cages, I'm not changing his swing. I'm giving him a high five. I'm saying great job, and I'm not changing his swing. So my answer to you, Brett, is if it's a great hitter, hits the ball really well, and I wouldn't worry about the metrics too much. Amber says, so tough to coach your own children. Some females are more receptive to dads. I have heard that too. My oldest daughter is 23 years old now, and I never coached her. But my 7-year-old daughter I've helped out a little bit with, and that's been pretty fun. So doing that. So let's see. Any other questions? We got 3 minutes left in this segment. Ryan admits, says, I was like your dad. The best thing we did was made the rule not to coach your own kids. What I found out was the less I coached my kid, the more they came up and asked for my help. Great thing there. James asks, how would you coach effort for young players? And my answer for that would be make it fun and make everything as fun as possible with young players. So contests, games, competitiveness, teach really fun things to get effort out of them. And so for me, I would always, reward the athletes that are giving the best effort. If you see an athlete, a young athlete that on your team that's giving the best effort out of anybody, hey, Johnny, great job with the hustle. Great job. If you single out your kids with the good things that they do, hey, great job hustling that out. Great job running that out. I promise you the other young athletes are going to see that, and they want that praise from you too. So coaching their effort in that way would be the best way to do it. Randy asks, how should you encourage your high schooler to stay positive when his coach is showing favoritism and awarding playing time with lesser skill and productivity? Great question, and I know that a lot of parents want to ask that or have asked that question before. And my best way to encourage your son or daughter in a situation where they're in high school and you feel like their coach is playing favorites is just to really, really focus on what they can control. Control the controllables. Work on your skills so much that the coach can't ignore you. For me, I can tell you right now that most coaches, and not every coach in the country, but most coaches, they hate losing. So if your son or daughter ups their skill game to where it's undeniable that they have to see the playing field, they would rather, even if they play favorites, they would rather win than bench you. So I forget who the athlete was that said it, but he said, I'm going to be so good the coaches can't ignore me. And for me, that would be my best advice for that. Cassie asks, what is the best advice you can give someone interested in an on-field coaching career in Major League Baseball? Cassie, I would tell you, that's a tough road. I would say that my best advice for someone that's interested in that is to share as much knowledge as possible. I use social media to share my knowledge and the knowledge that I learned for networking, for resourcing, to get to know people. And so, Cassie, if I were you, I would use social media platform to share ideas, enter the conversation. If you see someone having a really good conversation on Twitter or social media that at that level, enter the conversation. Try to provide some value to that, so that some people can say, "Hey, Cassie, she's really smart. She could be really helpful," and that would be really good. So, people who answered the cups of coffee, I'm reading a lot of. Jason says 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day. Joseph says 1.5 pots. Wow. So Joseph, you're probably feeling pretty awake throughout the day. Ed says 1 cup and then plenty of water. That's smart. That's really smart of you. Herb asks, how do you handle parents that want advice from their AAU coach to go against the philosophy of the high school coach? It's really difficult and a really good question. I would sit and talk with them. It really depends on your kid, which advice is better for them. So if my AAU coach was giving really good advice and I felt like my high school coach was giving bad advice, I would find a way to come to my high school coach, talk to them about that in a way that was very, humbling, not attacking, and say, hey, my son or daughter's AAU coach philosophy is this. We really like that philosophy. Can we talk to you about that and see what it is? So that's pretty good. Leslie says, fathers, remember your dad 24 hours a day and a coach when you're on the field of play. The voice your children hear is sometimes the same sound which asks to clean your room or do your homework. There is a difference. Absolutely. So, Peter, thanks for answering my question. It is now 16:35. So for me, that's 4:35 p.m. in the afternoon in Netherlands, and we drink a lot of coffee in Holland. I would love to visit one day, Peter. It's on my bucket list to visit Holland and the Netherlands, and I'm hoping to do that one day. Let's see here. Anybody else? Let's see. Yes, Coach Lisle, we love this. Good morning. Jenny asks, good morning, Matt. For a 14U pitcher, 13 years old, do you have a recommendation on how often to practice on her own and how many pitches to throw on a given practice? I'm not a pitching expert, especially at that age. How often and how many pitches? I think that's a great question. And I would tell you the person I would ask that question to online would be Amanda Scarborough. You can find her on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I think she's a great person for that. I'm not an expert on that. My only recommendation would be to practice as much as possible on her own without her parents forcing her to. So Mike chimes in on the coffee talk. I don't drink coffee, but I drink 1/2 to 1 gallon of tea a day. Attaboy. I said I've tried to do that a few times, and I can't really do that. So last question of the day. How to transition to coaching for a living? Best places to get started. I think Joseph, that's an entire show. That's an entire show that I'll answer questions on at one time. So I would tell you that the best way to transition into coaching for a living is to volunteer coach at a junior college, local college. If you can be and even at your high school, if you've never coached high school, is to volunteer. And I know it's hard to say the words volunteer to make this a living, but that's the best way to do it. So again, appreciate everybody's questions. We'll do it again tomorrow. So think about your questions for tomorrow, and I'll make sure to get to those. So the next segment I want to talk about, we'll call it story time. And I want to share, every day I want to share an incredible coaching story from my 20 years of coaching. And I thought the first story that I would share is the story of my favorite coaching story of all time. So during the 2017-18 season, I was coaching at the University of South Carolina. And our first baseman, who's a senior, Kristen White, one of my favorite players I've ever coached, her father, Buck, was killed in a car crash. And this was in December, and our whole team went and visited him. I visited him, and I can tell you, it was really, really, really difficult. And I know obviously for Kristen, but for the team, it was really difficult. I remember laying my hands on him and praying over Buck, And so we kind of dedicated the season to Buck. We got these Buck Strong bracelets. Buck was the biggest Gamecocks fan you've ever seen. He would drive all over the globe to watch Kristen play. It was literally the most incredible dad, one of the nicest men I've ever met. And you can imagine how difficult for Kristen it was. So, and our season was truly one for the record books. We were predicted to finish 12th in the SEC. We finished in 3rd. We went to the SEC championship. We were 9th in the country going into the postseason. We won 49 games. It was just an incredible season. We ranked as high as even 7th in the country. So we go into the postseason, and we host our first regional in many years. And in that regional, we got upset by Liberty. Just had a bad day. We didn't hit very well. We ended up losing to them. And so we go into this elimination game, semifinal elimination game, and we face against a girl named Sarah Cornell. And Sarah is a pitcher now at Alabama, stud pitcher, but she was at Hofstra at the time. And she dominated us. She absolutely dominated us the entire game. And as we headed into our final at bat, we're trailing 4-3. Okay? So we're trailing 4-3. Our season's coming down, and our first batter strikes out. 2 outs away from our season being ended on our home field in the postseason in this historically crazy season we had. Our second batter grounds out. 2 outs. So we're down to our last out. Trailing by 1, nobody's on. And as I sat on the bucket, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I started practicing my post-game speech in my head. I kept thinking, hey guys, I'm so proud of the season we had. Nothing to hang your heads about. I'm so grateful to be a part of it. I love you guys. And it's not that I didn't believe that we had a shot, but I've been in this game for 35 plus years, and when you're down to your last out, nobody on against a dominant pitcher, it's just crazy. So now we're down to our last strike, and Jana Johns draws a walk. Freshman stud that we had at the time, and who's now going to be who's a junior. And she draws a walk, and she sends Kristen White to the plate. Okay? So Kristen White comes to the plate. We're down by 1, runner on first. And you can understand, Kristen's dad had passed away about 5-6 months before this. It was an emotional season for her, for everyone. And I want you to understand that in her 150 at bats on the year, she had 2 home runs. Okay? So you gotta understand, Kristen was not a power hitter at all in her career. She comes down. This is likely her last. If she gets out, this is the last at bat of her career. Okay, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This true story. I looked up to the sky and I say, Buck, if you can hear me now, we could really use you right now. And here's what happened.
2-1 pitch, hit high and deep to left field. Michalowski to the wall, touch 'em all!
So you can understand there was not a dry eye in the house that night. I said the coaches are crying, the fans are crying, the players are crying. It was literally the most incredible moment in my coaching career as Kristen walked that off, and just an incredible night. And to this day, it is the greatest memory in my now 19-year coaching career. So, Kristen, love you. Still Buck Strong, and I thought it was really cool. I wanted to share this picture. This is my son Chase, who is now 8 years old. A picture with Kristen right before that game, her last senior game at home, and so they sent us to Super Regionals, and just like an incredible story. So love you, Whitey, and glad I got to share that story. And I know your dad was watching down and watching us in that moment. So. And the last thing, after story time, I want to end every show with just a motivational quote. And so today's quote I'm going to leave you with after the end of episode 1 says, "The best leaders are first to practice, first to meetings, first to focus in, first to speak up, and first to step up," by Gary Kearney. And so I just think that's a really good quote to leave you guys with today. And again, just want to thank you guys. I had a lot of fun today. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow we're going to talk about esports. And for the parents listening, it's just a fancy way of saying video games. So I'll see you tomorrow, 7 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And as the famed Harry Carey used to say, see you later. So long, everybody.